it's Ashley Bookish Femme, and I'm back with another video. As you can see from the title of this video, it's my March wrap up. It's a little late, but it is a large wrap up. We're going to talk about all the books, all the good things. If you're already here, make sure you smash that like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss a video. So before we get into the stats and the books and all that good stuff, I would like to talk a little bit about Book of the Month. So thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. If you did not know, Book of the Month is a fast growing and super popular online book service. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and help readers discover books that they love. One of my favorite things about Book of the Month, and I always say this and I will always say this, is that they provide a variety of books to choose from. They are diverse in their author selection and also the type of genres that they provide. There's a little bit of something for everyone. So whether you like mystery or thriller or romance or historical fiction or nonfiction, there is something there for everyone. So the way that it works is that the Book of the Month team goes through hundreds of books each month. They vet these books and they come up with a special curated list of new titles and early release titles. So when I say early release titles, I mean that we actually do get access to some books before they're actually technically published, which is pretty awesome. They do this so people can spend more time reading and less time actually doing research. Book of the Month is also risk-free. They have a skip policy, so you can skip any month at any time and you will not be charged. Another great thing about Book of the Month is they have the best prices for new released hardcovers. New release hardcovers are expensive. They're super expensive, but Book of the Month makes it affordable. If you did not know, it's usually $14.99 a month. However, today I have a special code that you can use to get your first book for $9.99. The code for this month is SPRINGFUN, and I will make sure that I put that code and the link that you can use down in the description box below. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to see what books we have for the month of April. So every month your books will come in this blue Book of the Month box. They also include a bookmark. Y'all know that I love Book of the Month bookmarks. This one says mark as unread, which I feel like I could use this in a lot of books in my collection. The first book that I see here is What Comes After by Joanne Tompkins. This appears to be a mystery type of book where we have two teenage boys who wind up dead, and then there's a mysterious third girl who appears, and she's 16 and she's pregnant, and the story is told from the three perspectives of these characters, in which we find out how this mystery girl is connected to these two boys, and we get the perspectives, I believe, of two parents, each a parent of one of the boys that ends up dying. The next one that I see is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Emily Henry is an author that I've heard a lot about, and people really seem to enjoy her books. This focuses on two characters who are best friends. They actually end up meeting on a car share, and then every year after that they spend a week going on a vacation together, and then it's one ride that ends up ruining everything, and I believe that they don't end up speaking for about 2 years. And so what ends up happening is our heroine decides that she wants to fix things and make things right. So she tries to convince him to go on one more vacation so they could put everything on the table and they could figure things out. I feel like this is going to be like a friends to lovers type of romance, and I'm curious to see what exactly went wrong between these two characters. The next one is The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. This is about a woman by the name of Sophie. Her and her family end up moving to a small town in Texas, and she ends up getting really bored until she meets another character, and they have this club called The Hunting Wives. And then Sophie kind of is really enthralled with this other woman to the point that it goes from curiosity to obsession, and she finds herself being basically torn away from her family because she's so obsessed with this other woman. And then a teenager ends up being found dead in the same area where the Hunting Wives Club typically meets. So this sounds like it's going to be an excellent thriller. I'm looking forward to reading this one, and I love the cover with the bullet and the lipstick, which is, that's ingenious. The next one that I have is one that I actually have been hearing quite a bit about, and it's Liberty by Caitlin Greenidge. And this is about a young woman by the name of Liberty who is born in Brooklyn during the construction era, and she's born free, and her mother wants her to become a doctor, and she's not sure if she necessarily wants to follow that path. She ends up getting proposed to by a Haitian man, and he promises her that when they go back to the island she will be his equal, and she ends up finding that she is still his subordinate and the subordinate of a lot of men in general. So she ends up having to learn what freedom and liberty like really mean, and this is actually based on the life story of one of the first Black female doctors. So I'm interested in the historical aspects of this, and it's set in a period of time that is really interested in US history, the Reconstruction era. So like I said, I've been hearing a lot about this one, so this is one that I'm like really anticipating reading. And the last one that I have here is Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala, and this is actually an early release. All of these are early releases except Liberty, and I also believe that what comes after comes out on the 13th of this month. So a lot of new releases that we're getting in the April selections, but this is one of my anticipated releases for 2021, so I was excited to find out that it was included in the box this month. And this is about a woman by the name of Leela who ends up going home after she has this horrible breakup, and she's trying to help save her aunt's restaurant, and then things just go horribly wrong. So a food critic comes in who's not particularly a nice food critic, and it ends up being her ex-boyfriend, and he ends up dropping dead. And she was with him moments before he ends up dropping dead. So it becomes this entire mystery. Of course, she's a suspect, but she decides to try to figure out the mystery herself. I'm really excited for this one, like super excited. So I'm happy to see that this one was included in the box. Okay, everyone, so like I said, the code for this month is SPRINGFUN. I will make sure I leave the code and the link that you can use down in the description box below. Make sure you check out Book of the Month. They have some really great options to choose from, a lot of new releases, and as always, thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. All right, y'all, so let's go ahead and jump into the stats part of this entire month. So I know a lot of people love the statistics, probably not my favorite thing, but people absolutely love the stats. So if you love it, you know, I like it. It's supposed to be if I like it, you know, if you like it, I love it, but y'all love it. I think I just like it. All right, so I'm actually pulling up my stats here. I can tell you for the month of March, I ended up reading 55 things. A lot of this stuff were single issue comics, so it's very interesting that like I don't feel comfortable using the word like, oh, I read 55 books, but it is a book. So I'm gonna say I read 55 books, but a lot of them were single issue comics. My page count according to Storygraph is 6,141 pages. Now it's tricky because some of the single issues don't necessarily have pages included. Sometimes it's based on like the edition, and it can get crazy, but I always use Storygraph's numbers as my numbers, even though Storygraph's numbers are going to be a little off because some of the stuff is missing page count information. But Storygraph said for the month of March I did read 6,141 pages. As you all know, I do keep track of the amount of listening that I do, and according to my calculations, I read 75 or listened to 75 hours and 16 minutes worth of audiobooks this month, which is a little less than I think what I've done in previous months, but that comes out to 3 days, 3 hours, and 16 minutes. On average, I was reading 198 pages a day, which is quite a lot, and that also includes what I listen to. So when I do page count, I do include everything that I listen to via audio. Okay, in terms of genre, I read 1 historical fiction. I read 35 comics, manga, and graphic novels. I read 5 romance books, and these broke down into 4 contemporary and 1 dark romance. I read 2 mystery / thriller and 7 realistic fiction. You know, realistic fiction includes literary fiction, contemporary, etc. I read 1 sci-fi and 2 fantasy, and then 2 erotica. In terms of target audience, I read 1 that was targeted at children, 43 targeted at adults, 7 middle grade books, and 4 YA books. In terms of format, I read 21 physical books, 20 ebooks / digital books, and 14 audiobooks. In terms of source, 16 were borrowed from the library, and these numbers are going to be a little different because some of these can fit in multiple places. So like I borrowed 16 from the library, but I could have also owned a physical copy, meaning that I probably listened to it on audio. 33 of the books that I read were owned, 4 were review copies, 3 came from Kindle Unlimited, 1 came from Comixology, and 2 came from Libro FM. I absolutely love Libro FM, so I'm glad that I've been listening to more. If you're interested in Libro FM, which they're a great company that gives part of the money that you pay for your audiobooks to a local indie store of your choice, so that money is going back into your communities, which is always great to support local small businesses. I have a link down below that you can use where you can get your first 2 audiobooks for $14.99. Don't feel obligated, but the option is there. 6 of the books that I read this month had LGBTQIA+ rep. This means that a main character, so I don't do side characters, it has to be a main character. 2 of the books I read were translated, 2 were rereads, and 17 were written by Black authors. In terms of star rating, I had 1 that was 2 stars, 3 that were 2.5 stars, which is surprising, 12 that were 3 stars, 6 that were 3.5, 27 that were 4 stars, 2 that were 4.5 stars, and 3 that were 5-star reads, and that gave me an average of 3.68. Now, I'm not going to read the publication stuff, but as you can see, I read a lot that was published in 2021 and 2020 this month. A lot of those 2021 numbers come from the fact that I am now keeping track of the comics that I'm reading. So I read new release comics every single week, so those numbers in terms of like 2021 are going to probably stay relatively high for the rest of the year. I do want to make sure I still am reading a lot of backlists, but those numbers are going to be skewed a little bit just because of those comics. The oldest book I read this month was in 1984, and that was because I read In the Hand of the Goddess by Tamora Pierce for the read along that I'm doing with Bethany over at Beautifully Bookish Bethany. 30 of the authors that I read this month were BIPOC authors, and 25 of the authors that I read were white, so we're pretty even there, 55 and 45%. 22 of the authors were men, and 32 of the authors were women. 4 of the authors identified as queer, and the other 51 we either don't know or they're not queer. So I always say that I put unknown because some authors do not feel comfortable disclosing that information, and I don't try to hunt for it. Most authors that I am listing underneath queer just are very open about whether they're queer or not, so I didn't want to just put not queer because I don't know, so it's unknown or not. In terms of where the authors are from, so remember, this is where the authors are from. They could have moved to a different location at this point, but this is where they were born and raised. 38 of the authors came from the United States, 2 came from Canada, 1 came from the UK, 1 from France, 3 3 from India, 2 from Japan, 1 from Cuba, 1 from Argentina, and 1 from Italy. So I did do a mid-month March wrap-up, so I'm not going to talk about those books in here. If you're interested in checking out my thoughts on those books, I'll make sure I link that wrap-up in the card symbol above, but I will go ahead and read or list out the books that I did read in the first half of March, and then we'll jump into the detailed review of the books I read in the second half. Curse of the Arctic Star by Carolyn Keene, Lupe Wong Won't Dance by Donna Barber Higuera, America Chavez Made in the USA issue number 1 by Kalinda Vasquez, Future State Suicide Squad by Robbie Thompson, Future State Aquaman issue number 2 by Brandon Thomas, Letters from Cuba by Ruth Baer, More to the Story by Hannah Hahn, Future State Harley Quinn issue number 2 by Stephanie Phillips, Future State Justice League by Ram V, Who Fears Death by Nettie Okorafor, Future State Immortal Wonder Woman issue number 1 by Becky Cloonan, Future State Immortal Wonder Woman issue number 2 by Becky Cloonan, Future State Superman issue number 1 House of L, Future State Wonder Woman issue number 1 by Joelle Jones, Future State Wonder Woman issue number 2 by Joelle Jones, Future State Superman Wonder Woman issue number 1 by Dan Waters, Nuclear Family issue number 1 by Stephanie Phillips, X-Men Legends issue number 1, Infinite Frontier issue number 0, and this is by a lot of different authors, A Good Kind of Trouble by Lisa Moore Ramey, The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez, and Something is Killing the Children volume number 1. Okay, so I'm kind of going to do the same thing that I did before with my March wrap up, where I talked about the books first and then I talked about the comics later, just because it's easier to keep some of the comics together than to try to talk about them in the order which I read them, because a lot of them are interconnected by event. So we're going to start with the books, and the first book that I ended up finishing was a book that I had for review, and it was Noelle the Mean Girl by Ashley Woodfolk. This is the third book in the Fly Sister series. These books are what I call high-low books, and not just what I call them, but what a lot of publishing industry librarians reference as high-low, meaning that they are high interest, low difficulty. These are really, really great for reluctant readers or readers that are not reading on grade level. So Ashley Woodfolk is working with Penguin to write these 4 books, and they have been pretty good. I give the first one 4 stars, the second one 3 stars. And I gave this one 4 stars. So this focuses on Nicole, and Nicole is biracial and she has some serious anger issues. So we follow her through the course of the novel as she tries to not only deal with her anger issues and her family issues, but also coming to terms with her sexual identity. She has a boyfriend throughout the first 2 books when we meet her, and in this third book, it's in the beginning, it's not a spoiler, she breaks up with her boyfriend because she has an attraction to someone else. I thought that this one was really, really well written. I felt for Nicole, and what I liked about this one a lot too is that it was no perfect ending to it. I think when you have something like anger management, or you're figuring yourself out in terms of your gender identity or your sexual identity, it's not something that's resolved overnight. It's a continuing process, and Nicole has a lot to learn about herself and how she treats people around her, how she treats her friends, and her friends were good at checking her on a lot of behavior that she does. I think that some of it was kind of bypassed in the first 2 books because we were waiting for the build up for this third book where we're getting things through her perspective, and I think that it was handled and done very, very well. I like Ashley Woodfolk's writing, and I'm glad that she's doing the series. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you definitely do check it out. Like I said, I did end up giving this one 4 stars. The next book that I read was one that I also had for review. This was a backlist book that I had reviewed, so I'm trying to catch up on some backlist reviews that I've had queued up for a very long time, and it's My Eyes Are Up Here by Laura Zimmerman. Now, I thought that this book was really interesting because it is focused on body positivity, but it's done in the form of breast. So we are following a main character by the name of Greer, and Greer has large breasts. She has developed in a way that her friends and her peers haven't. She's about a sophomore in high school, and she just is very, very uncomfortable with her body in terms of her breasts, and she goes through a lot of like hiding, wearing baggy clothes, not wearing fitted clothes, not having bras that fit, wanting to participate in sports and not being able to participate in sports because she doesn't have adequate support, especially in a sport like volleyball. So what I really liked about this book is that it does explore body positivity in a different way. I don't think I've ever read a YA book that focuses on development like extremely large breasts and how that affects young teens. And while I know a lot of the criticism that's focused around this book is that Greer's breasts are truly not that big, I think in really understanding this book is that as a teenager, you don't want to develop faster than your peers. And I think why I enjoyed that aspect and why it didn't bother me that a size H, I think, is not necessarily as large as what people were anticipating, and I think for a lot of people they don't feel like it's that large, but I think in the eyes of a teenager that is large. And while I didn't have large breasts growing up, I developed faster in my hips and in my backside. So what Greer was feeling in terms of not being able to fit in with her friends in terms of her development, I understood that because I went through that same experience. And even though probably in hindsight I'm thinking that it probably was not as big as I thought it was, now that I'm an adult, I know that it was not that big. But in comparison to my peers, it was. So it brought a lot of unwanted attention, and Greer deals with that a lot. A lot of unwanted attention from boys that are going through puberty, and it's very uncomfortable. So I really like that the author tackled that. I liked that there was a couple of side characters that were extremely supportive of Greer, and they wanted Greer to be able to do what she wanted to do and to live her life and not live it in terms of what her breasts looked like. I did have a few issues with this. So what I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars is because I did not like her mother at all. Her mother just wasn't as supportive as I wanted her to be. And granted, I think that she does end up doing some supportive things, but there was a few things that she was saying and doing that I did not like. And I felt like Greer deserved more, and I feel like she deserved a little bit more attention than what her mother was giving her. I also don't like that her breasts were personified. So her breasts are given names. Greer gives her breast name, but because they were personified, it takes a little bit away from Greer as a person, and it overshadows who she is. So the personification, I understand why it was done, but I just didn't like that element of the book myself. I also had an issue with the conversation that there weren't resources available to Greer being a size H. So resources do exist. I think that if the author had painted it and resources exist, but financially it may be a struggle, that would have been different. But I felt like it was almost as if there were no bras that existed that could possibly have fit Greer. And you know, this book came out in 2020, and I believe, you know, the book is a contemporary setting, so we're assuming it's taking place in 2020 as well, or at least something close to 2020. The resources exist. So I think if it had been framed maybe around like economically, bras in general are a pain in the butt. To get a good bra is costly. I think that a lot of people will tell you that good bras are costly. So if that would have been the framework of the conversation, I think I would have felt a little bit differently about it. But it was almost as if there were no resources that existed at all, like in the least bit. So that was kind of tough for me to get past, but it was a solid writing. I think it was a great book. Like I said, I gave it 3.5 stars, and it's one that I do recommend checking out. So the next thing that I ended up reading was 15 Inches by Madison Faye, and I blame this on Nicole. I will link Nicole's channel up above or put it down in the description box, because I'm gonna blame Nicole for this one. So I saw Nicole on Charles's channel, and they were just having a discussion about audiobooks, and the topic of Madison Faye came up, And I was like, who's Madison Faye? And everyone was telling me, oh, sign up for her newsletter. She has some free books that you can get. And one of those books was 15 inches. So we started talking about 15 inches. And I'm not going to tell you what 15 inches means because you know what the 15 inches is. And it literally is about this woman who is essentially hooking up with her gym instructor, and that is it. And I'm gonna leave the rest to imagination. I'm really interested in checking out whatever Madison Faye has out there. I know that she has a lot of series. I would recommend, if you're interested in reading 15 inches, to sign up for her newsletter, and you get that one and another book for free. So I gave it 3 stars. It was a solid read. It was a solid read. I'm not going to go any further into that one. Next, I read Sins of the Father by Mark Stephen O'Neill. And this one was really hard for me to categorize because at first I thought it was just going to be maybe like a suspense type of book. I didn't think it was necessarily going to be romantic, but then there is an HEA that exists. So this one is hard. It's very short. It was only like 50 odd pages, and it is about a hero and a heroine that end up meeting at a gas station. They're really into each other. They end up hanging out that night, and then there are some secrets that kind of unfold because we end up meeting the heroine's father, who had been significantly like absent during her life. And they meet and he explains why, and he has some things to tell her, and then it just kind of goes from there. I really can't tell you much about this one because it is a huge reveal, and I actually was not expecting the book to go in that direction. There were a couple of reveals that I was not expecting. I think that it was an okay read. I did end up giving it 3 stars, and I was a little bit more flexible, a little bit more lenient. I am with indie books. It's just a different rating system, or a different way in which I analyze and critique a book when it is done independently. I felt like the writing style was a little bit too simplistic for my taste, so that's why I ended up giving it 3 stars. I think that if the writing is kind of tailored and is a little bit stronger in the future, it'll be one that I end up enjoying more later on down the road. But this was an interesting introduction to this author. The next one that I ended up reading is the Magical Femme, and this is an erotic short story by Fiona Z. This is a Jamaican indie author, I believe, and I randomly found this book, and it is interesting. So I've been looking for more like Black love sapphic romances, and while this is not a romance, I think that the next book it's not necessarily a series, but this is a prequel to a full book of these 2 characters, and basically I think that they probably will end up getting an HEA or an HFN, one of the 2, but this is definitely just an erotic short, and it focuses on 2 heroines. The main heroine, and don't ask me to remember names because I'm horrible at remembering names, but the heroine whose perspective the book is told from, she is not interested in dating femmes. It's just not her thing. And then she meets a femme at a club, and it just is a club or a bar, one of the 2, and she ends up being really intrigued. They end up spending time getting to know each other, and the only thing that I will say is that there was a very nice mirror scene which I enjoyed, and I am anticipating possibly reading the actual like full story about their romance sometime this month. Hopefully I'm going to be able to do so. The next one that I read is actually a polyam sapphic romance, and it is by Tuesday Harper. This is an interesting book because I usually do not like romance books that have a cheating element, and they usually are kind of a stretch for me. Like, I'm usually not too keen on them, and this one does have cheating in it, so just, you know, as a content warning, if that's not your thing, you probably may not enjoy this one. But the reason why I found this one so intriguing, and the reason why I kept reading, and the reason why I gave it the rating that I gave it, is because I think that what Tuesday Harper was trying to do with this one is not just do a romance, but show what could possibly happen in a polyam relationship where 3 people are entering into a polyam and they don't know how to function appropriately in a polyam, and that they are working towards learning better communication, working towards saying this is what they want and this is what they need and what they're missing from their relationship. Because this focuses on Drea, Camille, and Mac, and the 3 of them had met in college. And I believe the way that it started, if I'm remembering this correctly, is that Drea and Mac meet, they had a thing, but Drea kind of was like, I can't, and come to find out it was because Drea had been seeing Camille, but then Mac also ends up meeting Camille and is super into Camille. So then there's like this thing going on where they couldn't figure out, like it was down to Camille, because Camille had to choose whether she wanted to be with Drea or Mac, and she couldn't decide, and Drea kept getting left out of the situation, and she felt like she was really being ostracized because those 2 were together, and it was really hard because they felt like their friends and their families weren't going to be accepting of the 3 of them being in a relationship together. So it would always look like Camille and Mac were together and Drea was getting left out, and it just causes a lot of issues because the 3 of them can't be together publicly, and they don't tell anybody that they're really together like that, and Drea just ends up looking like the 3rd wheel friend that just can't let the 2 of them go. So it causes communication breakdown. Camille has insecurities about what happened in the past, so there is some cheating that occurs, and some of it is off page, some of it is on page, but the on page aspects are not necessarily explicit. A lot of it is emotional. I mean, cheating is cheating, but a lot of it is emotional cheating that goes on, and a lot of it has to do with them not communicating and them treating each other wrongly because they don't effectively communicate what they want and what they need out of their relationship. So I know for a lot of people, like, this may not be your cup of tea, but I think that for me it was good insight to what could happen when there's not effective communication, and lack of communication is not a reason for someone to go out and cheat. Okay, I will stand by that. Like, when people cheat, it's because they choose to cheat, but I think that a lot of what was going on was lack of communication, lack of truly wanting to be in a polyamorous relationship. I think that there were some people who had to come to the realization that they weren't meant to be in a polyam, or if they were in a polyam, they wanted the flexibility and the luxury to bring people in, as many people in as they wanted to bring in. So it's not necessarily, it's not an HEA at all. It definitely is an HFN, and it ends on a note where it's kind of like, what's happening next? Like I said, this won't be for everyone, but I think I appreciated what the author was attempting to do with it. I think there were a lot of steamy scenes to it, and I did enjoy some of the characters. Mac personally is my favorite character. I feel like Mac was the glue that held all of the messiness together, and I just respected her as a character. I think Drea and Camille have a lot of issues that they need to work out outside of a relationship, but I really really loved Mac and who she was. The next book that I read was Fighting Words by Kimberly Brew Baker Bradley. I've read some of Kimberly's work before and I really enjoyed it. She writes a lot of middle grade books, and Fighting Words is a difficult book to read. It has a lot of content warnings for on the page sexual assault, attempted suicide on page, sexual abuse of minors. It's a lot. There's a lot that goes on, and the book really does focus on 2 young girls who are in foster care, and they are trying to move on from a serious situation. Also, content warning for parental drug abuse, and this is not a spoiler. The 2 girls end up moving into foster care because their mother was running a meth lab in a hotel with the 2 of them in it, and it exploded, so she's in prison. So they get sent into foster care, and clearly something happened with their mother's boyfriend, and it's a tough book. It is oh gosh, this is a tough book, but Kimberly does an excellent job writing it in a way that is appropriate and accessible for a middle grade audience. She doesn't shy away from calling it what it is, and I think that that's super, super important. And I would recommend that everyone end up reading the author's note for this one, because there's a reason why she put this book out into the world. There are going to be adults who are not going to be happy with this book. There are going to be adults who are going to feel like it's inappropriate for middle grade audience, but these are things that impact kids, and it's very, very important to be aware of these things, especially in a middle grade audience. I would say that this is for upper middle grade. I would say probably maybe starting at like 6th grade, maybe pushing it a little bit, but I think like 6th grade and up. I wouldn't drop this to 5th grade at all, but I think 6th grade and up may be an appropriate target audience. It was well written. I think that these two girls go through so much in terms of character development, and you know, we have a younger sister and an older sister, and the older sister struggles a lot because she feels like it's her job to protect her younger sister. And that's half of her journey, is understanding that she's still a child herself, but she's been placed in this role of being an adult that she can't really function the way a child should. And I'm glad that they ended up in a foster care system where they had, or foster care home where they had a foster parent who was very aware of what they had gone through and advocated for them, like advocated against the state for them. And that's the type of thing that's really needed. And I know that some people are going to say, oh yeah, well, you know, their foster mom, that was a little bit unrealistic in terms of like her being like the perfect foster parent. But I think that there are people out there who fight for these kids, who have been through these horrendous situations, who are traumatized by what they've been through. And it's heartbreaking and it's sad, but it's the reality for a lot of kids. And I think that it was an important story that needed to be told. Going to be one of my favorite books of 2021. I don't want to say too much about it because the emotional journey that you make with this book, and the character development, and how the story moves along, and how they build a relationship with their foster mother is super, super important. And oh gosh, this is a heartbreaking, it's a beautiful, 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 beautiful book. 5-star read, not surprised. I think that Kimberly does an excellent job with anything that she puts her hands on. But if you've never heard of this book, I highly recommend checking it out. The next book that I ended up reading was In the Hand of the Goddess. This is the second book in the Summer of the Lioness series. I read this with Bethany. This picks up, I think, a little while after the first book ends. I didn't enjoy this one as much as the first one because I felt like it was a little bit too fast. I think that Alana goes from like 15 to 18 in this book, so it's 3 years of her life covered very, very quickly. But there were a lot of good elements, of course, that were discussed in this book. I think that Alana makes a lot of character development. There's still those great friendship elements. It's her first time experiencing love and romantic relationships, and we really do get to see her grow and handle a lot of fears that she had in the beginning of the book. They are not necessarily resolved, but she faces them head on. So, you know, we get to see the process once again of her possibly becoming a knight. And this was one that I really, really had a lot of fun discussing with Bethany. So I'll make sure that I link that live show discussion in the card symbol above. And I ended up giving that one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I ended up reading was Diry Kisses by Kenya Wright. I read this one because it was the Taboo Book Club pick by Tamika, and Tamika asked me to be a guest on her channel for her Taboo Book Club. And this is my first time reading a mafia romance, so I actually did enjoy this one. It was a solid 3.5 stars. It focuses on a black woman who ends up having this situation go on with this Russian mobster type of guy, and he ends up kidnapping her brother and she has to work for him. But I think what we talked about a lot in that live show is that these two characters have a interesting like meetup. Like there's this instant attraction between the two of them, but Kenya Wright writes it in a way that it doesn't bother you. It doesn't feel too insta-lovey, and I feel like they really do get to know each other over the course of the novel. There's a lot of respect that is developed between the two because, you know, you have him like he's Russian mob, but he doesn't realize like the tactical skills that she has, and when she's able to prove those tactical skills, he is like, oh wow, like, you know, boss up, I have a lot of respect. This is a hot book. This is a steamy, steamy, steamy book, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I think that there were some plot holes that happen with the reveal that comes at the end of the book, because it just leaves quite a few lingering questions. I did end up checking out the second book, which is supposed to be a buddy read between myself, Tamika, and Izzy and Heather. So that's supposed to be a thing that's happening. I still have not finished the book yet, but that is a thing that's supposed to be happening. I will link the live show discussion that we had in the card symbol above. We do like a non-spoilery kind of section of it, and then we do delve into spoilers, so be mindful if you had not read the book yet. The next book that I read was Strictly Professional by Christina C. Jones. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I actually have done a full non-spoiler review of the first and second book in the series. I really did enjoy this. I reviewed it on the Now That's What I Call Black Love channel, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts specifically about this book, I will link that up in the card symbol above or down in the description box below. That way you can officially check it out. But Christina C. Jones in my eyes can do no wrong. I've read 4 of her books so far. I see I had to do that to count real quick. I've read 4 of her books so far this year, and I am loving it. I'm loving everything that she does. She is a gifted writer, and her characterization is some of the best that I have seen in romance, like at all, like not saying like, oh, you know, like an indie, no, just in general. Like she has some very great writing skills because she does characterization in a way that makes the reader feel very close to her characters, and she writes them in a way that the reader can't help but root for them, and this is no different. So if you like office romance, this is definitely one to check out. I mean, I would recommend checking out the duology, and I ended up giving that one 4 stars. Next one that I ended up reading was Delaney's Desert Sheikh by Brenda Jackson. This is the first book in the Westmoreland series. I wanted to like this book, y'all. I really wanted to like this book, but I only ended up giving it 2.5 stars. So Delaney ends up going on this vacation, and she ends up having to stay with Jamal, and he ends up being a prince. I had to look at his name. I couldn't remember his name. He ends up being a prince, and they end up basically in a forced proximity type of situation, and they fall in love rather fast, to the point that it was kind of like, wait, what happened? Wait, when did y'all fall? Like, what happened between the two of you that you would fall in love? Because the banter between the two of them was so intense. Like, she does not really like him in the beginning, and he has some very interesting perspectives of what a woman should and should not be doing, more conservative views than she has. And their banter was good. I really enjoyed the banter, but because they disliked each other so much, I was confused as to where the romantic element comes from. And then there is a scene that is not consensual at all, and I don't know why this was a thing. It was written in 2002, so, you know, time wise I can see why this would have been published. But he does something to her, not like full penetration or anything like that, but still he does something while she's sleeping, and then when she wakes up, like when she stirs or she's about to wake up, he like runs away, and then like it's never addressed whatsoever, which I don't like stuff like that at all. Like, I think for me as a reader, like, consent is super important and that really does bother me a little bit, that it just was never addressed or he never said anything about it. So I ended up giving this one 2.5 stars. I am going to continue with the series, but this was not my favorite. I think Brenda Jackson is a good writer. This just was not it for me necessarily, but I am interested in checking out the rest of the Westmoreland series because there's a lot by now. I then read Ghost by Jason Reynolds. This is the first book in the Track series. It's the middle grade series that Jason Reynolds has written, and it focuses on a young boy named Ghost who is having a lot of family issues. He comes from a household where his father attempted to kill him and his mother, and he's dealing with that. He ends up going to a track practice one day just randomly, and the coach kind of sees that he has potential, so he decides to recruit him as long as he stays out of trouble in school. And of course we go through some issues. What I liked about this is that Jason Reynolds, first of all, can write. We all know how much I love Jason Reynolds, but he can write so well, and I think that for me this was a great balance of a kid who just can't get it right, and you know, just trying to do the right thing, but he keeps getting it wrong. It was just a good even balance. It was great supportive characters, there's great friendships, great supportive adults, parents, supportive role models, and you end up really connecting with Ghost as a character. He has this amazing personality, this spunk about him, and he is dealing with a lot. It's a traumatic experience and it affects him so greatly, but he rises above it all. And I'm always amazed when I read this book, because this was a reread for me. I'm always amazed by this because I think that it can be hard being a kid and having to deal with all of those issues and still try to be a kid. Like, kids are some of the most resilient beings on this planet because they can go through so much and yet they still just want to be freaking kids. So we kind of see that a lot with Ghost, and I just loved it. I thought it was great. It was just really, really good. I gave it 5 stars the first time I read it, and I gave it 5 stars the second time. The last book that I read was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. Now, I have read Celeste Ng's first book, Everything I Never Told You. I have a review on my channel. I think it's still up. If it is still up, I'll either put it above or I'll link it down below. But Celeste Ng is a very, very great writer. She is a character-driven writer, so there's never really like a lot of plot stuff going on. It's not like a fast-paced plot or anything. Like, it's all about how her characters grow or things are revealed about them throughout the course of the book. So I was expecting it going into this book, and we buddy read this book because everyone in my Discord group was kind of like, oh, you know, let's read Everything I Never Told You so we can watch a TV show. So we all read the book and we're currently watching the TV show together. We do it like once a week. We watch 2 episodes of the TV show together, and I enjoy this. It was a 4.5 star read. It is about a woman by the name of Mia Warren who ends up moving to this quaint little town, this development in Ohio, and everything is planned, and she ends up meeting another woman. Now, someone commented on a video that I did about I think it was my April reading plans, and said, how did I feel about the fact that it's never really stated that Mia is black in the book, but in the TV show they chose to make her black. I think that the way that Mia and Mrs. Richardson interact with each other in the TV show with her being black with Mia being black, adds another layer of interest to it. I think that there are a lot of microaggressions that occur because Mia is black. And while Mia is never black in the book, I just got the feeling that Mia probably was not white necessarily. And I can't be 100% sure of that because there is no, it's not stated. It's never clearly stated. And I think for me, my perception is kind of skewed because I started watching the TV show with the group before I actually finished the book. So I started reading Mia as black, which may not have been Celeste Ng's, like, her intention, but it works with the book as well. And I could be wrong. I could, you know, like I said, my perception of that is probably skewed because I did read her as black. But it adds another layer, a very, very interesting layer if you think of Mia as being black and how that unfolds. But I think that this book is a good conversation about motherhood. And I know that some people feel like, you know, like Mia was painted as a better character than Mrs. Richardson, but I don't think either one of them was painted as good or bad. I think that as parents, as mothers or caregivers, or when we have children that are in our care, we think that we're making the best decisions possible. And I think in this situation and what we see unfold in this book, there are not always right or wrong answers. And sometimes when you feel like you have it all together as a parent or a caregiver or just, you know, a parental figure, you don't have it all together. Mia is very free-spirited in raising her daughter Pearl, and she feels like that's the path that she wants to take. And Mrs. Richardson is not that way at all. She is all about structure, organization, and her kids following a certain path. And when they don't, it's like they fall apart. Like, everything seems to fall apart because what they thought was a reality is not really their reality. And this is all like revealed through the intermingling of characters. So we get a very, very like black and white picture of everyone in the beginning, and as they start to interact, especially with Pearl intermingling with the Richardsons, the 4 kids, you start to learn a lot more. The dynamics of the family and how the siblings view each other, and how Pearl views them from an economic standpoint of them having money, and how she compares that to her life and how her mother treats her, and then how Mia connects with I believe it's Izzy is the youngest one. She's kind of like the oddball out in the Richardson family. How she connects with Mia on an artistic level, and how Pearl connects with Mrs. Richardson and some of her kids in a different way. And I think there's much to be said about the fact that sometimes it's easier for people to see your kids than you do. And what I mean by that, and it's probably really, really confusing the way that I say that, but what I mean by that is sometimes other people and outsiders can see your kids more clearly than you can as a parent, because you have this perception or this view of what you want your kids to be, and sometimes it's hard to let that go. Sometimes you want your kids to follow a certain path, and that's not who they are. And sometimes as a parent, because you want the best for your kids, you don't really truly see who they are sometimes. And sometimes it takes somebody from the outside saying like, this is not who your child is. They will never be this way because this is not who they were born to be. And I think that that element is discussed well. I mean, this is just a good book, okay? If you're looking for like this fast-paced plot type, you're not going to get that. This is very much so character development. Celeste Ng is known for her character development and her brilliant writing skills. I have read both of her books. Neither one has disappointed me. I think they're both brilliant. The TV show is vastly different from the book, so keep that in mind. If you watch the TV show, it's not the same as the book. There were quite a few interesting elements that were left out of the TV show that were very, very important to the book, and some things that were added to the TV show that are very, very important to the TV show, since it is considered like a mini series. Okay, y'all, so now that we've pretty much talked about everything that I have read like book wise, let's go back through, and I'm looking down because I'm trying to figure out like, okay, what have I read here? Okay, so we're going to go back through and we're going to talk a little bit about the comics that I read. So the first comic that I read, I don't know where my copy is. It's probably somewhere around here, but I don't know where it is, so I'm not going to go hunting for it. Just put a picture. Not a cart, a picture. And it is Wakanda Forever by Nnedi Okorafor. This was a tricky one, okay? So this is really, really interesting because this comic book, this trade, is basically the story of Nakia. Now, Nakia is not the same Nakia that a lot of people know from the movie Black Panther, where she is the love interest of T'Challa. In this, she is obsessed with T'Challa, and that is actually the comic book version of Nakia, is that she is obsessed with T'Challa and she becomes what is later known as Malice. So at this point, we follow Nakia as she's Malice, and Okoye and a couple of other Dora Milaje have been sent to retrieve her, bring her back to Wakanda. So this ends up being like a very one-sided love triangle type of situation, because once again, I'm going to say, if you don't know, you don't know, but Storm is T'Challa's love interest. She is T'Challa's partner, if you did not know that. And Nakia is very pissed about that. So it's very a one-sided love triangle, meaning that like Nakia is very into T'Challa, and T'Challa's like, I don't know what you want me to do, like, I can't be with you. And you know, Storm is pretty much like, T'Challa, you need to fix this type of situation. So I was not expecting that, and I didn't really necessarily enjoy that. But what I did enjoy was that we did get a glimpse at Black Panther Annual #1, where we find out how T'Challa is connected to some people like Jessica Jones, Luke Cage. It's crazy. I don't even want to say too much about it. I talk about this a little bit in my reading vlog for the month of March, and yeah, it was it was okay. Like, that part was really, really good, but the overall story was just not my cup of tea necessarily, so I only ended up giving that one like 3 stars. I then read BRZRKR issue #1 by Keanu Reeves. Listen, the comic book side of YouTube was talking about this so much, and I think it's like a hit or a miss for some people. I was kind of in the middle. I think I ended up giving this one like 3 stars, I believe. Yeah, I gave it 3 stars. I think that this definitely is a super violent comic. It's not going to be for everybody. I think that this has already been optioned for a TV show, which I'm not surprised. If you look at the cover, that is Keanu Reeves on the cover. I don't even know how to really explain this. He's like this semi-immortal being that's been contracted to do some killing, and all he wants to do is die. Basically, that's what BRZRKR issue number 1 is. After that, I read Future State Justice League issue number 2, and this one was hard for me to rate because of the fact that I liked the Justice League story, but I did not enjoy the Justice League Dark story in this one. It was kind of hard for me to make my way through the Justice League Dark backstory in this. It was very dry in my opinion, but the actual Justice League was really interested. It's a lot more intrigue. They had to fight these aliens that were mimicking them, and they were forced to get to know each other. So I talked about this a little bit before, where the Justice League characters before refused to get to know each other because of the fact that they knew that the previous Justice League characters were killed because they knew too much about each other, and that got used against them. So now they're trying their hardest like not to get to know each other, but this issue kind of forced them to do that. But I enjoyed that one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I then ended up reading Dr. Stone volume number 2. I gave this one 4 stars. It's not as good as the first one. I think that the story lost a little steam in this. I think I'm going to just continue reading this one from the library because I don't know if I'm going to collect it based off of this one. There are some new discoveries like gunpowder. We're still dealing with the same like morality issues of who gets to choose who survives and who doesn't survive in this story. I then went and read a lot of DC stuff. This is a lot of Infinite Frontier stuff. I'm not going to really go into details with a lot of these because I mean this video will end up taking forever if I did that, so I'm just going to quickly go through some of this stuff. I ended up reading Batman issue 106, which is really good. I think that Tynion is doing some really great work with Batman, and I really enjoy this issue. Love this variant cover. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It has a lot of the Bat family on it, which I'm not like a super huge Batman fan, but what Tynion is doing with Batman, I'm really enjoying. I read Swamp Thing issue number 1, and this is going to be a 10-issue series where Swamp Thing is getting his kind of standalone story. This one talks a little bit about immigration, which has been extremely interesting. I read Suicide Squad issue number 1, which has not been my favorite, okay? Suicide Squad and also Crime Syndicate. They have not been my favorite stories. I did get issue 2 of each of these. These are both, no, Suicide Squad is not a limited series, but Crime Syndicate is a limited series, and I'm just not super into it. Crime Syndicate is basically following characters from Earth 3. Suicide Squad, the reason why I'm so interested in this one, because Superboy is a part of Suicide Squad, but the story itself, like, I don't know, I'm kind of like iffy about it. I then ended up reading Demon Days X-Men by Peach Momoko. I really just got this because it's Peach Momoko's artwork, but the story to me was, the story wasn't that good. It is a play on X-Men. There's, you know, a Wolverine kind of like character. There is a Venom type of character. It's set in Japan. I just think that, you know, a little bit more could have been done with it, but I will be checking out issue number 2. Those just may be like cover buys for me at this point. I read the Joker issue number 1, which, holy crap. Okay, so it's not necessarily a Joker book. It is a Commissioner Gordon book where Commissioner Gordon is trying to deal with how he's been psychologically impacted by the Joker, especially after the Joker War and everything that he lost because of the Joker War. And listen, best freaking first issue that I've read in a while. I gave that one 5 stars. I didn't tell you guys the ratings for all these. I don't even think it's important at this point, but I gave that one 5 stars because it was just that freaking good. If you have not read Joker issue number 1, you're missing out. And it's not from the perspective of Joker, which I know pissed a lot of people off, but I think that it's cool that it is like a book that's focused on Commissioner Gordon, and we may get the perspective of the Joker later on, but that first issue definitely was from Commissioner Gordon's perspective as he's hired to kill the Joker finally. The next one is Wonder Woman issue number 770. I love this variant cover with the different Wonder Woman on it. We have Yara Flores on this one. Nubia is on this one as well. Absolutely love that variant cover. This is one that drops Diana as Wonder Woman in this Norse mythology type of world where we are introduced to Thor, and I know that people are like, oh, Thor, but Marvel. But no, Thor is Norse mythology, okay? And that was before Marvel decided to make capital on him. And they can't figure out, or Diana can't figure out, why she's in this place, like she's been dropped there, and it's kind of like a time loop. So it's in the middle of a war, and every time someone dies, they come back to life, and it's crazy. It's very, very strange. I'm very, very excited for issue 771 to see what actually becomes of that story. I then read Sabrina the Teenage Witch by Kelly Thompson. I was actually surprised by this one. I did not think that I was going to enjoy it as much as I did. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It is about, literally about Sabrina and the first time that she moves to this new town with her aunts, and there is this evil force that's turning kids into monsters, and she kind of has to figure out what it is. I really liked the artwork. There is a love triangle in this, but it's done in a way that it didn't really bother me the way that I thought it was going to bother me in terms of a love triangle. But I will be checking out the next like bind up that comes out, the next trade of this one, because I really didn't think that I was going to like it. But I've been hearing some really, really great things about Kelly Thompson anyway, so not surprised. I read Spell on Wheels as well. This one was a really good one. I already read this one before. This was a reread for me, and Spell on Wheels is about these 3 witches who end up having objects stolen from them, and they have to go and find these objects. But I think the intrigue of it is like we get to find out, because there's a second bind up out now where I think we get to find out like how witches are actually made within this world. But there's great diversity in this, great representation in this story, and the artwork was really, really great. I think it's just a fun and quick read. If you like witches, I definitely would check out Spell on Wheels. I think I ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. I read Justice League 59. Love this cover variant. I am not... I like Justice League, but the reason why I ended up picking up this issue is because Naomi is in it, which I just started reading Naomi's story through DC's app, and I really, really like her character, and I think that there's going to be some connection between her and Black Adam. But the hang up that I have is that she's young and these are like adult characters. So it's always awkward when you have a superhero team and then like most of the team is adult, and then you have like a teenager. It doesn't flow well, and I think we're gonna run into that issue. I do like Black Adam, but I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this as a whole. And this Justice League has different characters on it than the Justice League that we're used to, like with Wonder Woman, Flash. Then I read Harley Quinn issue number 1, and this one too, I love this variant cover. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Harley Quinn in this one is like an anti-hero, okay? Harley Quinn is not the Harley Quinn that you're used to. So if you're a huge fan of Harley Quinn, don't read this thinking that you're going to get the Harley Quinn that you typically got pre-Joker War. This is Harley Quinn post-Joker War, and she's trying to be good instead of evil. So you get to follow her. She's still making mistakes, but she's trying to rectify her mistakes. I hated the artwork of this book. Absolutely hated it. That's the reason why I rated it so low, because I thought the story was good, but the artwork, man, I just couldn't jive with the artwork. It was just too chaotic for my liking. So yeah, but like I said, if you're a Harley Quinn fan and you're expecting like your traditional Harley Quinn, this ain't it. I read Batman Detective Comics issue 1034. This is Tamaki doing this, and this is good, okay? This is really, really good. I think that we're seeing a different Batman in this. We're seeing kind of like a broken down Batman, post-Joker War, lost everything, trying to figure stuff out. This is where we get a glimpse too of like the Magistrate again and its origins, which we saw in Future State. So this was a good combo. This is a good writer illustrator combo, and I'm eating this up. I'm really enjoying it. And like I said, I'm not a huge Batman fan, so the fact that I'm enjoying these Batman comics and Batman detective comics, it says a lot. It says a whole lot. I also read Punchline. This is a one-shot by Tynion, and Punchline apparently makes an appearance. This character was created during Joker War. Punchline to me feels like a watered down version of Harley Quinn. This is a reason for Harley Quinn going good and having a replacement for her. And Punchline to me is just not, she's not my favorite. She's like a new Joker sidekick. Definitely a Harley Quinn replacement. I'm just not feeling her as much as I think I should be feeling her. But I think that she's going to make some appearances in these new comics that are coming out. So this is basically like her trial where she's getting held responsible for what happened during Joker War, and we get to learn a little bit about her backstory. And her backstory is so similar to Harley Quinn's. Like, it starts off with like a story about obsession with the Joker and everything that he's done, and what story is he trying to, you know, say. And, you know, she's the punchline to the joke. So, you know, like, she's, you know, the punchline comes before the joke, and she's Punchline, he's the Joker. Like, I get it, but like, not, it's whatever for me at this point. And the last things that I read in terms of comic was Far Sector issue #1 by N.K. Jemisin. This is a new Green Lantern, a black Green Lantern, where she is in space on this planet where there's 3 like species of things, beings that do not get along, and they haven't had murder because all of their emotions have been stripped from them, but then a murder does occur. So she's investigating it. I have seen this new Green Lantern, I believe her name is Jo. I have seen her in DC Future State already, so I'm interested in seeing like the rest of her. So I'm going to read the rest of N.K. Jemisin's work with her. I have access to a bunch of it. I think a new issue just dropped this past week. I didn't pick it up. I should have picked it up, but I may just get it next week. Something along those lines. But I did end up giving it 4 stars. And the last thing that I read in terms of graphic works was Emma and Violette, and this is a translated graphic novel, and it's about these 2 girls who wish to be ballerinas. That's what it seems to appear. Then we figure out that it's a lot more about like parental influence, and Emma definitely wants to do her own thing, but she's kind of fighting against her mom and what she wants to be, and how she wants to carry on in terms of her future and her career. And it's very, very short. It was only 50 pages, but I did enjoy it. I'm interested in reading the rest of the volumes. I think that there were some translation issues because some things were kind of weird in terms of translation, but overall it was solid. I did end up giving it 3 stars. All right, y'all, so that's it. That's everything that I read. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what your favorite book was in March, and if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you click the subscribe button. If you want to see more content, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss a video, and I will be back with another video soon.